Hello and welcome to this virtual session. We're glad you can join us today. Before we get started, there's a few housekeeping items we'd like to go over with you now. Firstly, you can resize the webinar windows to cater to your viewing preferences. You can maximise, minimise and drag the windows to your preferred viewing size. If you look at the bottom middle of your screen, you can click on the widgets that you'll need to get the most out of this virtual experience. Secondly, Microsoft specialists are on hand to answer your questions in real time. So feel free to type in your questions using the Q&A window and we'll answer them as soon as we can. Lastly, we've provided some additional resources for you to supplement your learning. You can access them by clicking on the links in this section. Without further ado, I'll hand over to our speakers.
Hello and welcome to the Microsoft Azure Training Days Fundamentals event. This course will cover foundational knowledge of cloud services and how those services are provided by Microsoft Azure. As we move from parts 1 to part 2, we'll cover cloud concepts, cloud models, Azure resources, Azure core services and solutions, and key services such as security, privacy, compliance, and trust. We'll wrap up with pricing and support. As you can see, we have a lot to cover. This course will prepare you to write your AZ900 exam and obtain your Microsoft Azure Fundamentals certification. So let's get started. Let me start off by introducing myself. My name is Lorraine Lawrence, and I'm an Azure Technical Trainer based in the Toronto, Canada office. It is both my honor and privilege to be here with you today as we go through the Fundamentals course. The course has 6 modules. Module 1 will be Cloud Concepts. Module 2 will talk about Azure Core Services. Module 3 is all about Solutions and Management Tools. Module 4 will look at Security and Network Security. Module 5 will look at Identity, Governance, Privacy and Compliance. Ending off with Module 6, which is Azure Pricing and Life Cycles. Let's start by talking about the exam. This course maps directly to the AZ900 Microsoft Azure Fundamentals exam. The questions are pulled from a pool of hundreds of questions and you're given 60 minutes to write the exam. The exam will be multiple choice and there will be no labs. If you look at the chart in front of you, the approximate weight of the subject matter is indicated on the right-hand side. The higher the percentage, the more questions you'll likely see on the exam in that area. If you're new to the cloud, I suggest you supplement this learning with a little bit more study. We have a wonderful Microsoft Learn course, which maps directly to this course with extra reading materials, outside links, case scenarios, and quizzes. I highly recommend it. Let's begin with Module 1, Azure Cloud Concepts. In Module 1, we'll look at cloud models, including public, private, and hybrid cloud. We're going to look at cloud benefits and considerations and look at why customers are moving to the cloud. And then we're also going to look at cloud services and a term called shared responsibility. Cloud models. In cloud models, we're going to define what cloud computing is. We're going to look at the public, private, and hybrid cloud models, and then we're going to compare the three models together. So what is cloud computing? It's the on-demand access to a shared pool of computing resources. They are normally located around the world, and these resources can be anything from servers, networks, storage, database, applications, etc. The resources that you use can be provisioned and released with minimal effort. You don't need any deep technical skill to use the public cloud. Public cloud. It is owned by a cloud services or hosting provider. They provide resources and services to multiple organizations and users. These users normally access the network via a secure connection, typically over the internet. There's no deep technical skills required to use the public cloud, and the service is usually available to everyone, the public. So private cloud, on the other extreme, is owned by an organization. It is normally only limited to that organization, and the organization is responsible for everything, from actually purchasing the hardware, to the updates, to the networking and the security, everything. The organization does not normally allow public access to their resources. It is normally private. And then we have hybrid cloud. It is a combination of public and private cloud. The organization decides what resources they're going to put in the cloud and which ones they're going to keep in their own private cloud. Deep technical skills are required to maintain the private cloud and also ensure that both clouds can operate together efficiently. There is flexibility. The organization decides what is in the private cloud and what is in the public cloud, and they're able to meet any compliance regulations regarding security or data requirements. So let's take a look at the three models again. Public cloud, we talked about that. The organizations pay for only what they use in the cloud. It's available to the public, and there's no capital expenditure needed to scale up resources. The other extreme is private cloud, where the hardware has to be purchased by the organization who is running that cloud. Deep technical skills are required for the maintenance and updates of this private cloud. The organization normally has complete control of the resources and do not let the public access it. And then there's hybrid cloud, the most flexible of the three cloud models. The organization will determine which applications and resources run where, meeting any data requirements and compliance regulations they need to meet. So let's take a look at cloud benefits and considerations. Cloud benefits. We are going to look at some key terminology regarding the cloud. We're also going to look at capital expenditure and operational expenditure, and we're going to look at what a consumption-based model is. So why is everyone moving to the cloud? There must be a reason. The 8 terms in front of you are probably the biggest reasons customers are moving to the cloud. Let's start at the top. High availability. What is that? It's the ability to keep resources up and running for long periods of time with very little downtime. Then there's scalability. So we have 2 different terms, scaling out, which is horizontal scaling, which means adding more resources or servers or virtual machines as you need them. And then there's scaling up, adding to existing resources either by adding more CPU or adding more memory. Global reach, another big benefit of the cloud, is being able to access resources and put your resources around the world. And then agility, the ability to react quickly to workload demands. Do you have a sudden spike in traffic? Do you need to allocate more resources? Or do you have a sudden slowdown and need to deallocate resources? Fault tolerance is that ability to remain up and running if a component or service has a failure or no longer working. We all know what it's like to when you turn on your computer and you have that tap, tap, tap noise, meaning your hard drive is not working. Well, in the cloud, there's all sorts of ways of protecting yourself against that. And then we have elasticity, similar to scalability, but I want you to think of elastic band. So an elastic band, when you pull it, when you release it, it goes back automatically. That is elasticity, the ability to automatically increase or decrease resources as needed. Customer latency. You want to be as close to your customers as possible to reduce the latency for them accessing your resources. So now with the cloud, with that global reach, you can put resources around the world, putting them as close to your customers as possible. And then predictive cost. It goes with a calculator we'll look at later, helping you determine the actual cost of what you're going to spend in the cloud before you spend it. No one wants that surprise bill at the end of the month where they thought it was a certain number and it's double or triple. In the cloud, you're able to quote what you're going to spend before you actually spend it. And that we'll take a look at coming up soon. Let's talk about expenditure models. We have capital expenditure, or CapEx as it's known, is the upfront spending of money on physical infrastructure. When we needed to create our own data center, we had to get budgets approved, buy a space or have a location, go out and physically buy those resources, and then network them all together, put them all together to build our own data center. So that's a capital expenditure model. In the cloud, we don't need to do that. We are spending as we need it, and that's operational expenditure, OpEx. So the expenses are normally deducted in the same year, and you're paying monthly or yearly for those expenses. So capital expenditure versus operational expenditure. Consumption-based model, another huge benefit of the cloud. Previously, when we used to have our own data centers, we'd have to plan for those spikes in traffic in the data center when we're actually building it. So most data centers would run at 50 to 60% of their actual capacity, having room for that spike whenever it happened. In the cloud, we don't have to spend that money up front, and we don't have to plan for that in advance. We use the resources as needed and pay as we use them. Think of it like your utility bill. You have a meter on it and you pay by what you actually used. The same thing in the cloud. You're paying by what you actually use. And if you don't need a resource anymore, you can deallocate it or remove it from the cloud. So let's talk about cloud services. Cloud services. We actually have 3 different types of cloud service models. The first one being IaaS, which is infrastructure as a service. The second one, PaaS, which is platform as a service. And then we have SaaS, which is software as a service. Each contain different levels of managed services. You can use a combination of these types of services depending on what you require. For example, you can use Microsoft 365 for your company's computers, which is SaaS. In Azure, you can host your VMs, which are an IaaS model. And you can use Azure SQL Database, which is a PaaS model, to store your data. The cloud gives you that flexibility, and you can use any combination you choose. It's important to understand these different service models because they're used in conversation, documentation, and training. After that, we'll also talk about what a shared responsibility model is. Infrastructure as a service. So what is it? It's basically the paying for resources as you need them. So it's like renting servers and virtual machines in the cloud, and you're paying by what you actually use when you need it. Think of that meter again on your hydro. So in this case, infrastructure as a service, you're going to rent servers, you're going to rent the firewalls and security, and you're renting the physical data center or the building, and you put all your resources on top of that. You load your own virtual machines, you choose your storage, you choose your operating system, all from that cloud solution provider. In the platform as a service model, the cloud solution provider is responsible for everything apart from the customer's own application. They're responsible for managing the server, the infrastructure, the operating system, the network, and even the service configuration. This model provides an environment for building, testing, and deploying software applications without having to worry about the underlying infrastructure. It allows your company to be more efficient and more productive. And then we have software as a service. Users connect to and use cloud-based apps over the internet, for example, Microsoft Office 365 and calendars, and they're basically renting that software monthly or yearly. The cloud solution provider, so in this case Microsoft, would take care of everything else. So the servers, the networking, the operating systems, the physical buildings, development tools, and even the hosted applications and apps. Summarizing the three cloud service models, we have the IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS models. In IaaS, I want you to think of the word flexibility. Microsoft, the cloud provider, configures and manages the hardware running underneath your application. You, the customer, selects the operating system and the hardware. A good example of an IaaS resource is virtual machines. In PaaS, I want you to think productivity. The customer focuses on their application development. The platform is managed by the cloud solution provider, which is Microsoft. A good example of a PaaS product is app services or containers. And lastly, we have SaaS, which I want you to think of the word subscription. It's a pay-as-you-go pricing model, monthly or yearly, and I want you to think of Microsoft 365, email, calendars, or tools such as Teams. Remember, you can use any combination of these infrastructures. We've just reviewed the cloud service models, and remember, it's all about control. You choose the level of control you want. The shared responsibility model in front of you goes hand in hand with these cloud service models. Let's take a look. When you look at on-premises, the very left on that chart in front of you, that's our private cloud. That customer is responsible for that entire stack you see in front of you. So everything green from storage all the way up to data and access, the customer is responsible for. Moving to the right, the infrastructure as a service model, Microsoft manages the compute, networking, and storage, which is the physical hardware. And the customer manages their data, applications, runtime operating system, and virtual machines. Moving to the right one more time at platform as a service, the customer focuses on their applications and data. Remember the productivity model, and Microsoft manages the infrastructure underneath. For the very last model, the software as a service, the customer manages their data and access, and Microsoft takes care of everything else. For all cloud deployment models, you're responsible for protecting your security of your data and your identities, your on-premises resources, and any cloud components you have control of, which vary by service type. We've covered a lot of foundational knowledge in this module, including cloud models, the benefits of cloud, and different levels of cloud service. In Module 2, we'll begin narrowing our focus to Microsoft Azure. We will start with Azure regions worldwide, and then we'll begin introducing you to core Azure resources. We'll look at Azure architectural components, looking at regions and availability zones, then moving on to core resources such as compute, networking, storage, and databases. Starting with regions, I want you to take a look at the map to the right-hand side. Take a look at those blue dots around the world, and those blue dots represent regions, Azure regions. We have over 60 regions located globally, as you can see, representing over 140 countries. Azure actually has more global regions than any other cloud solution provider. That blue dot, which is that region, represents a collection of data centers. It can be from 1 to up to 16 data centers. These regions help organizations meet their data residency requirements, which we'll talk about coming up. When you select a region, you want to select it as close to your customers and users as possible for that low latency we talked about earlier. It's important to note that not all regions have the same features built in, since they were created and built at different times. Now let's go a little bit deeper. We're talking about region pairs. So like those blue dots, they have region pairs, which means two blue dots in the same geography, separated by at least 300 miles of separation. These are automatic region pairs. So it's very important when you plan your deployments to pick automatic region pairs wherever possible. For example, if I was deploying my resources in East US, I'd want to pick the automatic region pair in the West US. So if there ever happened to be a wider Azure outage, one region out of every pair would be prioritized to help reduce the time it takes to restore data and applications. So you want to make sure you're in those automatic pairs. When Azure plans updates, they are rolled out to one of the region pairs at a time to minimize any downtime and risk of application outage. These region pairs are 300 miles apart for data protection. And then we have availability zones. They are built to protect against downtime due to a data center failure. So when we refer back to that map, that blue dot, we are looking at an azure region, so like the diagram onto the right-hand side. And inside that region, we could have multiple availability zones, up to 3 actually. These are physical separate data centers located within the same region. Each one of these data centers is equipped with its own independent power, cooling, and networking. And they're connected together with private fiber optic networks, so there's very low latency between them. So if one region happened to go down, in this example, let's say availability zone went down, availability zone 2 would be fine because it's independent. As a reminder, not all regions have the same availabilities. You want to make sure they have the architectural structure you need before deploying your resources. So let's take a look at an availability zone in Dublin, Ireland. So this is Azure's facility in Dublin, Ireland. I'll give you a second just to look around. There's lots to see in this picture. Let's start off with the physical structure. As you can see, we have a fenced wall that goes around the entire structure, all the way around, and that's for security. So we want to prevent people from coming in. So adding to our security, we have some physical security. So there's this gate here. We've got security cameras, and if someone was trying to ram the gates, let's say, even if they got past here, they've got to go through a round driveway, so they're not building up any kind of speed. They're going to come around here, have to make a sharp left to be able to get in, so they're not building up any kind of speed. That's meant for security. You can see there's not a lot of parking. It's because we don't want a lot of visitors. It's not open to the public. If you get a chance to go to a data center, you're invited. Please go, because it's very rare to go actually see a data center. If you're not on the list to go to see a data center, you will not go in. You can't knock on the door, buzz security, and say, I think I have some things in here. I just want to take a look around. We're not letting you in. It's meant for the protection of all our customers inside this data center. So you can see by the size of the cars in relation to the building how big this facility is. We've got 3 different colors of buildings here. We've got this blue one up front, this mainly white one back here, and then another blue one back here. So you are actually looking at one availability zone with 1, 2, 3 data centers. So these data centers have their own heating, cooling, and networking, and there's power generation sources here for the buildings. And there's actually a physical gap between these 2 buildings. You can't see because of this high wall, but you can see this one a little bit more. There's a physical gap here between these 2 data centers. There's also some power sources over here for these data centers. So remember, if this one happened to go down, these ones are independent of each other and they would still operate. So this is the Dublin data center. This is actually 3, 4, and 5 data centers out of almost 15 in this area, to give you an idea of the size of these data centers. So let's talk about availability options. In the cloud, we have a lot of flexibility to plan for backup and resiliency in case there's a data center failure or some sort of issue. When we talk about availability options, we want to make sure we're getting as high a 9 as possible. So starting on the left-hand side, I've got one single VM, and it's a 99.9 uptime SLA, which is a service level agreement, with premium storage. But that's a single machine. If I wanted to do better on that number, I'm going to go to the right-hand side, and I've got that same VM with an SLA of 99.99. So it's a higher SLA because I'm distributing that VM and its backup across availability zones. Remember, that's separating themselves from each other, independent power, cooling, and networking in a region. Moving over one more time to the right. So if I'm dispersing my virtual machine across multiple regions, I'm going to get even higher SLA because I'm diversifying and spreading out my risk. So in this case, on the right-hand side, I'm looking at region pairs. So remember, 300 miles apart minimum is the region pair rule. We'll talk about that in further details in another module, but I just wanted to introduce that concept. We're having a plan for backup, plan for resiliency, and that's the benefit of the cloud. It's easy to do. Now let's start talking about Azure resources. So in the cloud, what do we put in the cloud? We, of course, build our environments, we build our applications, we put our databases there, and these are some of the resources we have available. We've got, of course, virtual machines, we have storage accounts, we have databases, app services, functions, many different resources in the cloud. So you pick and choose what you need to run. And then we have resource groups. So we have those resources on the previous slide. We want to make sure we're grouping them into some sort of logical group. It could be by project type or project lifecycle, which is normally the preferred way of doing it. So when that project is ended and you no longer need those resources, you can deallocate them off the cloud, and it's easy to do. Other companies put all virtual machines together and all storage together and all their web and databases together. So different ways of organizing. You as a company should organize how you're going to do it. Resources, so if I had that virtual machine or that app, can only exist in one resource group, but that resource can be anywhere in the world. It doesn't have to be in the same region as that resource group. You can move resources between different groups if you needed to, and applications can access multiple resource groups. They don't have to be in one resource group. We're also going to talk about role-based access coming up, and that's ways of securing your access to those resources. Now let's talk about something called Azure Resource Manager, or ARM for short. ARM, or Azure Resource Manager, provides that management layer that helps you create, update, and delete resources within your subscription. The best benefit of it is it allows you to automatically deploy and configure resources using different automation tools and scripting tools such as Azure PowerShell, Azure CLI or Command Line Interface, the Azure Portal, REST APIs, and client software development kits. Automating the creation of resources help you maintain consistency and standards across your deployment. So suppose you have several business units around the world and they require 10 identical resources. You can use an ARM template or Azure Resource Manager template to deploy those resources consistently. So that's one of the benefits of using an ARM template. Then we have Azure subscriptions. An Azure subscription provides you with authenticated, authorized access to Azure accounts. In the diagram to the right-hand side, you can see we have in blue an Azure account, and underneath it we have 3 subscriptions. I want you to think of subscriptions as the billing account. So take out the S from subscription and put a $sign there. So the bill would come to dev, would come to test, and would come to production in this example. So the billing account is a subscription, and it's an automatic billing boundary. It's also an access control boundary as well, where you can access and manage control to those resources within a certain subscription. An account can have multiple subscriptions like you see in front of you. We're going to jump into the portal and take a look around. So let's go. Here we are in portal.azure.com. Let's take a look at what the portal looks like in Azure. Starting from the right-hand side, we're going to make our way left as we cover all the buttons we pass. So hovering over, this is my account. It tells me my email address, my directory, and also my domain. Moving towards the left, I've got a happy face, so that's my feedback icon. I can give feedback on wherever I am in the portal. If I find this page confusing to understand, give us that feedback so we can use that to improve our products. Moving over to the help, the question mark, I can get help and support starting here. There's also a lot of links below and guided tours that you can take from here. Going over to the cogwheel icon, let's click on that. That's the portal settings itself. So this, what you see in front of me, is my home page, which is right here. I can also switch to a dashboard view as my home page. So whatever I choose, I prefer what I see right now, but you can use dashboard view and I'll show you what that looks like coming up. I also have an option to have the portal menu as a flyout or docked. I prefer flyout so I have more real estate on the page, but you can have it in whatever way you choose. You can also choose between different themes, and you can select here, high contrast, white, black as well. Moving over to notifications, when you see a number there in red, it means you have not seen something in there. So maybe you went to lunch and came back, there might be something you hadn't seen, that's just alerting you about that. Moving one more over to the Directory and Subscription tab, I can filter between what subscriptions I want to show up when launching the portal. You can see I have many subscriptions down below. I'm going to keep HR tests because I'll be using it all throughout the day. This next button on the top is called Cloud Shell. It's a greater than symbol and an underscore is what it looks like, but it actually pulls up a scripting environment right inside the portal without us having to go anywhere. It's very handy. Moving over one more time to the left, I've got the search bar and I start to type in a word and it starts to filter in services, resources, marketplace, and there may even be a video or two that pops up that helps guide me through what I'm trying to do. Moving one more time over to the left, that's my portal menu that we talked about earlier. You can see what's in there right now. I've got some favorites, as you can see there. Let's take a look at the favorites. I'm hovering over function apps. That star on the right hand side means it's a favorite. If I remove that star by unclicking it, you'll see it will disappear from my menu. Looking at other things in that portal menu, if I hover over virtual machines, I can see recent resources I've created, even some free training from Microsoft, and some useful links along the bottom. Hovering over load balancers, another one, I can see description. It describes what it does. Let's go to virtual networks. It shows me recent resources I've created in virtual networks. So this menu is really handy. Let's go take a look at dashboard. That's the other home page I have an option to have. As you can see, I've got a few resources here. I've got some quick start and tutorials in the center there. I've got metrics. I don't tend to use a lot in this demo account, so it's pretty empty right now. I can set up time zones, users and groups as well. I can also put help and support or any other metrics I'm trying to track. This could be your home page. Remember, we just have to set it up in the portal settings. If I select edit, a graph paper shows up and I can move these features around to make my dashboard. Continuing on back to the portal, I can see all the other resources I have in front of me, including the most recent ones I've created. I can go to all resources and take a look at all the resources in my subscription. If I go to all services, these are services that are offered by Microsoft. On the left-hand side are all the different categories, and featured ones are on the right-hand side, and there's even some video training, as you can see down in the bottom. If I click on storage accounts, I can go in and actually create a storage account by just clicking add and continuing from there. Starting with Azure Compute Services. So what are compute services? They're basically on-demand computing services that provide computing resources such as disks, processors, memory, networking, and operating systems. We've got virtual machines, we have app services, container instances, Azure Kubernetes service, and Windows virtual machines. We're going to go into each one of them in a little bit more detail coming up. So starting with virtual machines, what are they? They're software emulations of physical computers, so virtual. They include a virtual processor, memory, storage, and networking. If you remember our IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS models, this one is an IaaS offering. It gives the organization total control and customization ability. And we should also mention virtual machine scale sets at this time. Remember that automatic scaling we first talked about, one of the benefits of the cloud? Well, virtual machine scale sets allow you to automatically manage fluctuations and workloads in the cloud. Remember that elastic benefit. It's still an IaaS model. There's no pre-provisioning of the VMs required, but you can plan for them to scale out and scale in as needed to manage demands and workflow. Here I am in the portal, and let's get started creating our virtual machine. So I'm going to create the virtual machine, and then I'm going to connect to that virtual machine, and then install a web server role, and then test it. Let's get started. So I'm going to create a new resource. I can also go to virtual machines, or I can also look on the left-hand side here and look for all services, and then compute. And these are all the compute services. We're going to touch on some other ones later. Let's start with virtual machines, clicking on it there. And I'm going to go add a virtual machine. And it pulls up a graphical user interface that will walk me through the creation of my resource. So let's get started. On the Basics tab, which is where we are right now, I'm going to slide down so you can see a little better. We've got these tabs going across the top. They also will repeat across the bottom. Starting with my subscriptions, we're going to talk about subscriptions. That is your account where the billing goes to. So you want to put those resources into a subscription account. I'm keeping the one subscription, and I'm going to use that throughout my demonstrations. But now I need to start by creating a resource group. We talked briefly about resources and then resource groups. So I want you to create your resources, preferably with the same life cycle. I'm going to go ahead and create a new resource group for this demonstration. And I'm going to call it my resource group VM. The name is available because it's in green. You can see that right here. I'm going to go ahead and create. Sliding down so you can see a little bit better, just moving down to the bottom. Next thing I need to do is create a name for my virtual machine. So what name am I going to give it? When you create your names, I want you to pick something that's meaningful for you and your organization. For my demonstrations, I'm really going to pick a really simple name because I'm going to delete it at the end of the day. So let me go and create a name. I'm going to call it my VM3. Okay, so make sure you pick a name that makes sense to you. Mine are really simple. And because I'm in Toronto, Canada, I'm going to pick a region closest to me or one of the closer ones. I'm not going to pick Asia. I'm going to go over actually to USA East or East US. Sliding down again, giving you a little bit more visibility here. Something we talked about very briefly, we talked about availability zones. If you recall, that region, the blue dot on the map, has many availability zones inside of it. So I can choose that as my resiliency plan, or there's something called availability sets. We didn't really talk about it, but it's another way of protecting yourself, and they're putting your virtual machine on different servers and different racks in the same data center. So those are availability sets, different from availability zones, or actually separate data centers. As I mentioned before, not all regions have the same availability. So I'm going to switch this so you can see what I'm talking about. Let's go to Canada Central or Canada East, let's pick. We're going to go look at that availability options, and you can see availability zones is grayed out. So in this, I only have an option to pick availability sets. Okay, so every region is different. Make sure you research your regions before starting to put your resources in there in case there's a particular feature you need. So I'm back to USA East. I'm going to keep these off for now. Don't have to pick them. There's no asterisk there, so it does not mean it's a mandatory field. And I'm going to pick an image for my virtual machine. This one's going to be Windows 2019 Data Center. So I'm going to pick this one here. There's many other private images. I'm just going to show you what that looks like. So there's a lot of images here. There's a particular build you want, and it goes on and on and on. Okay, I'm going to pick something simple, keeping my 2019 data center. Spot instance, that's your chance to save some money if you've got something that's temporary. We tell you not to put anything production on there, but if you have, maybe you're just running a few tests for a couple weeks, so use a space on our server very, very cheap. Spot instance tells you right there. Discounted rate versus the pay-as-you-go price, and has to be tolerant to infrastructure loss, so we may need that space. As you'll notice, there's an information icon beside everything. Hovering over gives you information about what they're talking about, what they're looking for as an answer. Okay, so I'm at size right now. I'm going to keep mine pretty basic. As you can see, there's a price here right beside it, and that's part of that predictive cost. So I know what I'm going to spend per month on this virtual machine, and it tells me how many hours as well. So I'm going to let you see other options. These are ones I tend to use more often. There's many more sizes. I'll let you take a peek quickly. So there's more sizes here. I've filtered between certain gigs, but you can see very much more. Let's go down the scroll. A series, I've got D series, B series, E series, and I'm going to show you pricing just so you understand what we're talking about. It can go in the thousands of dollars, depends on what you choose. Okay, that predictive cost. Going back over, I'm going to not pick any of these. I'm just going to pick my default one, which is the D2S version 3. So I have 2 CPUs and 8 gigs of memory. Now I've got to choose my administrator account, sliding down so you can see my administrator account. Let's call it Azure Admin. And I need to choose a password. So it meets all the criteria for my password between 1 and 20 characters. It doesn't have any special characters, and it's not a reserved word. Now in the password, I'm going to go pick a password. I want to show you something. It does not let you pick the word password. That is a reserved word, will not let you choose it. And it has to be between 12 and 123 characters long. So I'm going to hide that. I'm going to put in my real password. There you go. It's okay. Confirming that password again. They match, so I'm good to go. Sliding down a little bit more. Now we're at inbound port rules. So as I mentioned before, we're going to connect to this virtual machine, so I need to have some public inbound ports open. So I'm going to make sure I'm allowing ports, and let's go through and choose. I'm going to definitely RDP to it, so I'm going to put that on, and I've got HTTP as well, port 80. So I've got 2 ports open, as you can see, and I'm allowing access because I want to check and connect to this virtual machine. That is allowing IP addresses to access my virtual machine, which I'm trying to do. And it gives me a warning that there is public access to my VM, which I want. Sliding down a little bit further. Licensing, so if I bring my own license, you're going to talk about that when we go through the cost calculator. I'm saving on the licensing fees, which if I have a license, I will definitely bring it. I don't have one, so I'm not going to click that box, but there's a way to save up to 45% or 49%. Moving over to disks. So I'm going to choose premium storage, but I have other options. Premium storage with only one virtual machine running, no backup into an availability zone or an availability set, gives me a 99.9 uptime SLA. And we'll talk about that coming up. So I'm keeping premium storage. Scrolling down a bit more, I'm going to go into networking next. And I want to make sure I can connect to my ports. Scrolling down so you can see it a little bit better. So a virtual network is going to be created, a subnet will be created, and I'm going to get a public IP. Let's check the ports that I have open. I have to make sure both of them are selected, so RDP 3389 and HTTP 80. Warning me again, it's going to allow public access to my virtual machine, which I want. We'll talk about load balancing coming up. It's not part of now, but you have that chance to load balance across various machines if the load increases. I'm not going to touch that. We're going to go down to management. Going to turn off boot diagnostics for now because I don't need it. It's a demo machine. Let's take a look at this screen a little bit closely while we're here. I have an option to auto shut down. So suppose I'm working on a test project and I don't want it running over a weekend, or maybe the office is closed for a few weeks. I can actually shut down that virtual machine, and I can set the shutdown options. Clicking on it briefly, show you what that looks like. I can shut down, say, at 7 p.m. Do I want a notification before shutting down, and who does that notification go to? I'm going to turn that off for now, but that's where you'd find it. I can also enable backup and start that. I'm not putting that on right now, but I can set that up right while I'm setting up my machine. Going to advanced. Going to leave everything as is. I don't have any extensions, anything else I'm loading. It's going to be pretty simple. I'm going to review and create. Oh, let's go to tags too. I mentioned before that my subscription is a billing account. If I have multiple projects and multiple resource groups in the same subscription, I may want to divide up that bill by tagging the resources in it. And that's where I'd come into tags. I can put a name for my tags. I can say maybe HR. So this belongs to the HR department. And I can maybe call it project ABC. So I can filter by that project. So that tag will stay with this. At the end of the month, when I've got several pages of bills or many bills, I can divide it up by project ABC. So let's go ahead and review and create the options I've created, sliding down below. It's verifying that everything makes sense and there's nothing that's unusual, giving me that predictive cost. As you can see here, it's 24 cents an hour for that virtual machine. So everything is passed, the validation is passed, and I just want you to take a look at this part down here. It's download a template for automation. We're going to talk about that later when we talk about ARM templates. But if I had a lot of complicated choices I made along the way, I may not want to do this every single time when I'm creating a virtual machine. So I could save that template to reuse again and again. I'm not going to do that because my options were quite simple, but I'm going to go ahead and create. As you can see, it's starting to work and create. It's also moving up here, warning me something is going on. So it's really going to quickly create. Okay, so my resource is created. I can either go here or the other spot. So I'm just clicking on the top one. I'm in my virtual machine called Virtual Machine 3. It is running. It's in East US. So it's ready to go. Just sliding down so you can see a little bit more. So now I want to connect to this virtual machine, and then I'm going to load a file. So let's go to connect. I'm going to connect through RDP because I opened that port. And I'm going to download the RDP file. File is downloaded. Okay, it can't verify the identity of the connection, the remote connection. I know it is, it's me, so I'm going to connect. I need to sign in as another user. Signing in as in a different account. So remember, Azure Admin is what I used. Putting in my password. There you go, and I'm going to sign in. So it can't identify the remote computer I'm connecting to. That's okay, I'm going to go ahead. And I'm getting into my virtual machine. So here I am in my virtual machine. I'm going to go now connect to PowerShell. I'm going to go down here and look for PowerShell. There it is there. I'm going to go run PowerShell. Here I am in PowerShell. I'm going to install the web server feature in the virtual machine now. So I'm going to paste the commands I've got ready. So it's install Windows feature. The name is web server and encoding management tools. Selecting enter, it's going to run. There you go. So it's finished installing my web server role. You can see success is true. So now I'm going to go back into my actual portal and take a look and connect to it. Back in the portal, I'm at my virtual machine. It's virtual machine 3. It is running. And I want to now connect to that virtual machine by going to the public IP address on the right-hand side here. I'm going to copy the IP address to my clipboard, create a new browser window, paste that address in, and there you go. I'm connected to that virtual machine. So we just came back from the portal. We created a virtual machine where I had to pick the resource group, name the VM, and then I connected to that VM through RDP. I loaded a web server image, and then I also tested to see that I could connect. That was one type of compute resource. There's another type of compute resource options, and they are called serverless computing options. So serverless computing is different from virtual machines where it doesn't need storage and an operating system to run. They run as needed, when needed. So they are that PaaS service, the middle model of the three services, IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS that we talked about. So it's a PaaS service, and the first one we're going to look at is called Azure App Services. They're fully managed platform to build, deploy, and scale your web apps and APIs quickly. They work with .NET, .NET Core, Node.js, Java, Python, or PHP. Remember, this is that PaaS offering, so they're cheaper to run, faster to run as well, and you're just paying by that short usage time. Now we're looking at another serverless compute option, which are called functions. What functions are small pieces of code that you can launch without worrying about the application infrastructure. Think another PaaS offering. A function is triggered by a specific type of event, such as changes in data, responding to messages, running on a schedule, an HTTP request, or even an event triggered by another SaaS application. They're designed for short run, and they're little tasks that are stateless. In simple terms, logic apps provide automated access and data across clouds without writing code. Every logic app workflow starts with a trigger, which fires when a specific event happens or when new data becomes available. Many triggers provided by the connectors in logic apps include basic scheduling capabilities, so you can set up how regularly your workloads run. Remember, part of the serverless compute option, these two tools run instantly in short bursts. And now we're going back to look at serverless compute options. Azure Container Instances are a lightweight virtualized environment that does not require that operating system the virtual machines need, and they respond to changes on demand. So ACI, or Azure Container Instances, are preferred ways to package, deploy, and manage your applications. You simply call the ACI endpoint, and the ACI service takes care of managing that infrastructure for you. Again, it's a PaaS offering, if you remember the IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS models. So they're quick to run, very economical, and they run for you. They're taken care of for you. With ACI, you can choose to have them event-driven, but you can also have them sit there and be long-running. They can run for hours, days, weeks, or months. Basically, they're containers that you spin up or down as you need to go. You can deploy public and private Docker images, which are stored in registries to your container, and we'll look at that in the next demonstration. And then we have something called Kubernetes service, and it's a type of orchestration service to manage these containers. So when your applications start to grow, you've got multiple containers across multiple servers, operating them becomes a more complex issue. That's when you're going to use Kubernetes service. In simplified terms, you would use AKS for running multiple containers with sophisticated orchestration, managing rolling upgrades, automatic scheduling, and automatic scaling. To help you remember the word Kubernetes, I want you to think about a large container ship traveling across the ocean. The captain of that ship normally manages the placement of those containers because he is in charge of that ship. The word Kubernetes, loosely translated in Greek, means captain. So that may help you remember the word Kubernetes. We are going to go back into the portal to deploy an Azure container instance. Configure and deploy a Docker container to an Azure container instance, and it's going to display a hello message on an HTML page. We're back in the portal, and we're going to create, configure, and deploy a container instance using Azure Container Instances. The container itself is a Welcome to ACI web application that displays a static HTML page. Let's get started. So in the portal, I'm going to search for containers. And I'm looking for container instances right there. Clicking on it. Let's go ahead and add. We're going to create one. Similar screen shows up. Just going to scroll down. Basics, I'm putting it in the same account. Resource group, I'm going to create a new resource group for this one. Okay, make sure your naming convention makes sense. I'm going to scroll down so you can see. There we go. Yes. Scroll down so I can see a little bit better. I have to pick a container name, and I'm going to use that is available. It's between 1 and 63 characters long. Region, again, I'm going to keep all mine in East US. There I go right there. Scrolling down a little bit more, and I'm going to use that Docker Hub. It's going to be publicly accessible. And the image I'm going to use is the Hello World image. Okay, that's an image I have available. It's going to be a Linux OS. I'm going to keep the size default. I'm not going to play with that. Going over to networking. I need to choose a DNS name label, and it has to be globally unique. So let's find a name I can use. That name is available. Scrolling down so we can see. And I'm going to leave everything else the same. Going to review and create. Looks like the validation has passed. I'm going to go ahead and create. Again, I can save that template. Going ahead and creating. Okay, my resource has been created. Let's go to resource. I'm in my container resource instance here. I'm going to close this window right there. It's there. It is running, as you can see, in East US, and there's my container resource group. And I have nothing going there as yet. As you can see, I have no activity. So now I'm going to look at the fully qualified domain name, which is here, and I'm going to connect to this container. Copying that here. Going to the browser, pasting, and I've now connected to that container. With the shift to remote work and working from home, having access to a great computer is a must. But buying, provisioning, and securing and shipping this computer and maintaining it is an IT department's worst nightmare. What if a company could purchase a virtual desktop in the cloud for each one of their employees, and that could run on a standard OS with a standard set of applications and be managed and maintained remotely? That is what Windows Virtual Desktop is. Windows Virtual Desktop gives you the flexibility of virtualization for a wide range of computing solutions, which support Linux, Windows Server, SQL Server, Oracle, IBM, SAP, and more. All current generation virtual machines include load balancing and auto-scaling at no cost. We have many networking services in Azure, the first one being Azure Virtual Networks, which enable many types of Azure resources, such as virtual machines, to securely communicate with each other, the internet, and on-premises networks. A virtual network is scoped to a single region. However, multiple virtual networks from different regions can be connected together using virtual network peering. We also have Virtual Private Network Gateway, VPN, which is a distinct type of virtual network gateway that sends encrypted traffic between an Azure virtual network and an on-premises location over the public internet. It provides a more secure connection from on-premises to Azure over the internet. And lastly, we have Azure Express Route. It's a dedicated private connection from your on-premises location to Azure through a direct link that you would set up with a connection provider. It can be expensive. You would pay a flat rate or by traffic volume, and it's meant for large enterprise customers who need the speed and secure connection. We're back in the portal at portal.azure.com, and we're going to do our next walkthrough. In this walkthrough, we're going to create a virtual network. Then we're going to create 2 virtual machines, and we're going to have one ping the other one. So let's get started. So we need to start by creating our virtual network. I'm going to go search for virtual network up here. And as you can see, it was also one of my favorites, one I've used recently, so it's there as well. So I'm going to click on it here. And I'm going to go to add and create that virtual network. I'm going to use the same subscription. I'm going to create a new resource group. So make sure your naming convention makes sense to you and your organization. So I've created my resource group. Let me name my virtual network. That name is available. I'm going to choose the region closest to me. Like all my demos, I'm going to use USA or East US. Going over to the IP addresses. I'm going to continue to use the default one. I'm not changing that. I'm not changing anything else. I'm going to use default settings for this example. There's tags again. We talked about tags, tagging your resources for the billing. And going to review and create. So validation's passed on the very basics I put in. Let's go ahead and create. As you can see, it's starting to deploy. That was nice and quick. I'm going to close this down. We're going to go to that resource. Let's just make sure it's running. So it's my virtual network 2. That's what I named it. It's in East US. That's the resource group I just created. So it's there. So let's start by creating my virtual machines. I'm going to go look up here for virtual machines. There it is right there. Clicking on it there. Going ahead and adding virtual machine. Sliding down so you can see my screen a little better. I'm going to find that same resource group because I'm going to put the 2 virtual machines into the same resource group. So I'm going to go look for it here. There it is. Remember, I'm picking a simple name. Make sure your name makes sense to you. That name is available. East US again, sliding down. I'm going to change the image to Windows Server 2019 Data Center. Sliding down again. I'm going to keep the size the same. I'm just going to use the default. I'm paying $175 a month if I'm using this one. I delete at the end of the day, so I'm not worried about the cost. Going in and adding my admin account. adding a password, confirming that password, sliding down a bit more. Now we've got to look at the port rules. Which ports am I going to allow access to my virtual machine? So I'm going to pick selected ports because I want to be able to ping them. So I need to put a selected port. I can't choose none. And let's see my options here. So I've got HTTP 80, I've got HTTPS, SSH, and RDP. So we're going to use RDP for this example. So I've kept that highlighted and it's chosen. And it's warning me that this IP address will allow access to my virtual machine, which I want. Sliding down a little further, going to disks. I'm keeping the defaults again just to make it easier. Premium SSD, remember that gives us a 99.9 SLA. I'm not going to worry about anything else here. Going to networking. I've chosen the virtual network I'm using. I'm going to keep the subnet, the default, the public IP default as well. Not changing any of these. Just making sure my RDP port is still selected. Okay, and I'm not choosing a load balancing option for this one. Going over to management just so we can see. I'm going to disable boot diagnostics. And I can worry about these later. This is just getting us up with a virtual machine and virtual networks. Going to review and create right now. Looks good. Let's go ahead and create now. This is my first virtual machine in my virtual network. There you go. My resource has been created. I'm going to go to resource just to verify. So this is my first virtual machine that I just created, VM3. It's running and its location is East US. So let's create another virtual machine. I'm going to go up to here. Virtual machine is here, so I'm going to select that. Go ahead and add. We're going to do the same thing with another virtual machine, sliding down so you can see it a little bit better. I'm going to put it in the same resource group. So I'm looking for my resource group, virtual network, and it's 2. There I go, right there. And I'm going to name this virtual machine. So very easy for me. So I have virtual machine 3, and now I have virtual machine 4, keeping it in the same region. I'm going to use the same image again. I'm going to go to my 2019 Windows Server. That's my size. It's fine. I'm going to go add my administrator account username. Typing in a password, verifying that password, sliding down. Again, I need inbound port rules to say allow selected ports because I'm going to ping these machines. They're my options again. I'm just picking RDP. Everything else is the same. I'm just going to show you just so we know. Premium SSD. Going to the networking options, I'm going to keep the default. It's using the same virtual network as if you remember, VNet 2. Keeping all the other settings as default, so the subnet, the public IP. It is warning me that all IP addresses will have access to my virtual machine, which I'm aware of. Let's review and create. First validation is passed. I'm going to go ahead and create. So let's go to that resource. I'm going to verify it's running. So this is VM4, and it's in the same resource group. So I'm going to search for the first one I created, so it's VM3. Let's take a look. There it is. I'm going to go take a look at that. Remember, we checked it's running. I'm going to connect to this virtual machine or try to connect. So I'm going to go to connect, and I'm going to do an RDP connection. And I'm going to download an RDP file. File is downloaded. Let's open it to connect. It is warning me that this publisher of this remote connection cannot be verified. Do I want to continue? And I'm going to say yes, I'm aware. I'm going to sign in with my admin account. Put in my password. It's it's warning me again. It cannot be verified. The identity of the remote computer. I'm aware. I'm going to go in. Here I am in my virtual machine 3. Let's go in. I'm going to get to PowerShell, searching for it in the bottom here. There it is there, and I'm going to sign in as admin. Here I am in my PowerShell session. It's just starting up. There I go. And that's my user that I'm signed in with. So I'm going to now try to ping the other machine. And if you recall, that was VM4. So I'm typing ping VM4, enter. So request timed out. Timed out again. So it's timed out. It sent 4 packets. So it's not able to connect. And the reason why it's not able to connect, Windows Firewall by default blocks ICMP requests. We're going to have to go back into that virtual machine and allow ICMP requests. We're back in the portal now, and I'm going to go to my VM4. Let's search for it. There it is. Now I'm going to connect to this virtual machine, and then I'm going to allow ICMP requests. So I'm going to connect, RDP, download the RDP file. There it is, they're loading. Let's open it up. Again, it's giving me that warning. The publisher of this remote connection cannot be verified. I'm going to connect. I need to sign in again. Again, another warning. The identity of the remote computer cannot be verified. I'm going to continue. Here I am in Virtual Machine 4, so let's run PowerShell again. I'm going to run as admin again. Here I am in PowerShell. I'm now logged in as admin user. I'm going to paste in that command that will allow that ICMP connection. So I'm allowing a new net firewall rule. Display names allow ICMP4. Taking a look at what we see, it has been enabled. Now we're going to go back to the virtual machine, the first one, virtual machine 3, and we're going to ping it again. I'm back in the portal in VM3, and I'm going to connect again using RDP to my virtual machine. And then I'm going to ping virtual machine 4 again. So going ahead, open that file, sign in. Going back to PowerShell, signing in admin. So let's try again to ping virtual machine 4. As you can see, it connected with virtual machine 4 times. 4 packets sent, 4 received. So because I allowed that ICMP connection on virtual machine 4, I'm now able to connect. Congratulations! We've just successfully completed this lab. We created a virtual network, created 2 virtual machines in it, tried to ping the first one. It did not let us because of the Windows Firewall security. So we went ahead and allowed an ICMP connection to that virtual machine, which was virtual machine 4, and I just pinged it and it connected. We have a variety of database services in Azure, including Cosmos DB and SQL databases. Cosmos DB is a globally distributed database service that enables to elastically and independently scale throughput and storage across a number of Azure geographic regions. It's a non-SQL database. It allows you to take advantage of very fast millisecond database access using your favorite API tools such as SQL, Cassandra, MongoDB, and Gremlin, and it's the first and only service to offer 5 nines SLA. And then looking at our SQL database offerings, we have Azure SQL Database, which is a relational database as a service based on the latest stable version of Microsoft SQL Server. It's a high-performance, reliable, fully managed, and secure database. Azure Database for MySQL is a fully managed SQL relational database service for app developers based on the MySQL Community Edition. And then we have Azure Database for Postgres. It's a relational database based on the open-source Postgres database engine. We also have an Azure Database Migration Service. The Database Migration Service is a fully managed service designed to enable seamless migrations from multiple database sources to Azure with minimal downtime. Many organizations have SQL databases on premises. What if you could move those SQL databases into the cloud without having to touch the code, structure, and security? And what if that cloud database ran the same SQL software and was managed, patched, and maintained for you by Azure? That is Azure SQL Database Managed Instance. The goal for SQL Database is to provide customers wanting to move to the cloud with as close to possible zero-friction platform. It has a 99.9 uptime and a 99.99 parity with the on-premises SQL Server because it runs on the same source code. So instead of worrying about the expense to re-platform an application and database to run in the cloud, you could just move it to Azure SQL. Azure Managed Instance combines the broadest SQL Server database engine compatibility with all the benefits of a fully managed evergreen platform. SQL Managed Instance has a near 100% compatibility with the latest SQL Server database engine, Enterprise Edition. It provides a native virtual network implementation that addresses common security concerns and a business model favorable for existing SQL Server customers. It allows SQL Server customers to lift and shift their on-premises applications to the cloud with minimal application and database changes. At the same time, SQL Managed Instance preserves all past capabilities, including automatic patching, version updates, automated backups, high availability, all of which drastically reduce management overhead and TCO. The last thing we need to cover in this module is the Azure Marketplace. What is Azure Marketplace? It's where you can find, try, and provision Azure applications and services from certified service providers, Microsoft partners, independent software vendors, and startups. We have close to 10,000 products in the marketplace. Let's go take a look at where we can find it. We're back in the portal and we're going to look for a marketplace. Let's go search it up here. There it is. Let's click on it. So here is the marketplace. And here are some of the categories of the products we have. You can click on any one of them. Let's start at the top, maybe compute resources. And if I'm looking for a particular build of something I'm using, you can go more and more and more. You just keep looking. There's 10,000 products in here, products and services in here. Go back to some maybe database tools. Go into machine learning. Okay, that's Marketplace. You can search right at the top, and that's where I found it. How are you doing? We just covered global Azure regions, management groups, subscriptions, compute, networking, storage, and databases. That was a lot. I'm going to give you a chance to stretch your legs, refill that beverage, and come back and meet me for Module 3. Welcome back from the break. I hope you're refreshed and ready to keep learning. In this next module, we'll introduce Azure Core Solutions and Management Tools. Are you ready to get started with Module 3? Let's begin. Module 3, Azure Solutions and Management Tools. We have several Internet of Things offerings, including IoT Central, IoT Hub, and Azure Sphere. IoT Central is a fully managed global IoT solution. It makes it easier to connect, monitor, and manage your IoT assets at scale. There's no cloud expertise required. So you can bring your connected products and devices faster to market while staying focused on your customers. And then we have IoT Hub, a central message hub for bi-directional communication between your IoT applications and the devices it manages. Use IoT Hub to build IoT solutions with reliable and secure communications between millions of IoT devices and a cloud-hosted solution backend. You can connect virtually any device to your IoT Hub, and it handles massive amounts of data. And then we have IoT Sphere, a comprehensive IoT security solution including hardware, an operating system, and cloud components. It includes Azure Sphere certified chips, Azure Sphere OS, and Azure Sphere Security Service, which monitors threat detection. Use the IoT product selector to determine what product best suits you. Azure Big Data and Analytics. Azure Synapse Analytics provides limitless analytics and brings together enterprise data warehousing and big data analytics. It accelerates time to insight from all data at any scale across data warehouses and big data analytics systems. It combines the best of SQL technologies using enterprise data warehousing, Spark technologies used in big data analytics, and pipelines to orchestrate activities and data movement. HD Insight is a fully managed open source analytics service for enterprises. It's analytics at large scale. It is a cloud service that makes it easier, faster, and more cost-effective to produce massive amounts of data. HD Insight allows you to run popular open source frameworks and create clusters such as Apache Spark, Apache Hadoop, Apache Kafka, Apache Storm, and machine learning services. And then we have Azure Databricks, a collaborative Apache Spark-based analytics service. Use it to set up your Apache Spark environment in minutes, auto-scale, and collaborate on shared products in an interactive workspace. It supports Python, Scala, R, Java, SQL, as well as data science frameworks and libraries including TensorFlow, PyTorch, and scikit-learn. Artificial intelligence and machine learning. Machine learning is a predictive intelligence that data scientists and data engineers use to speed up the slow training process and tedious deployment tasks. Machine learning provides a cloud-based environment to develop, test, train, deploy, and manage machine learning models. You can use the service to auto-generate a model and auto-tune it for you. Use it to start training on your local machine and then scale out to the cloud. If you're new to machine learning, get started without writing code using Machine Learning Studio. It's a collaborative drag-and-drop visual workspace where you can build, test, and deploy machine learning solutions and predictive analytics solutions without needing to write any code. Go from idea to deployment with a few clicks. You can also integrate our many Microsoft services to build a more intelligent business application. Cognitive services. You can use AI to build business impact, bring computer vision to your business, or add a human touch to your online interactions, spot anomalies, or extract information from data. No machine learning experience is needed. And then we have Azure Bot Services. Provide an experience that feels less like a computer and more like dealing with a real person or at least a highly intelligent robot. Shift simple, repetitive tasks, such as taking a dinner reservation or gathering profile information, onto automated systems that no longer require direct human intervention. A bot interaction can be a quick question and answer, or it can be a sophisticated conversation that intelligently provides access to services. Azure DevOps Services provides development and collaboration tools, including Azure Repos, Azure Pipelines, Azure Boards, Azure Test Plans, and Azure Artifacts. GitHub provides hosting for software development and version control using Git. It provides access control and several collaboration features, including bug tracking, feature requests, task management, and wikis for every project. And then we also have GitHub Actions for Azure. It's automation tools to build workflows from GitHub to Azure automatically, using an open source version of DevOps repository. It makes it easy to automate all your software workflows, build, test, and deploy your code right from GitHub. And then we have Azure Dev Test Labs, which allow you to quickly create development and test stages using reusable templates. You can use pre-created images, minimize waste with quotas and policies, and minimize costs by using automatic shutdown. Starting with Azure Management Tools. We were in the portal before where I gave you that demonstration. We also have PowerShell, which we've used a few times. We've got the mobile app, command line interface, REST APIs, and Cloud Shell. Azure PowerShell is a set of commandlets that allow you to manage Azure resources directly from the PowerShell command. CLI is a cross-platform command line program that connects Azure and executes administrative commands on Azure resources. Azure Cloud Shell is that browser-based scripting environment in the Azure portal that we've used before. It provides flexibility by allowing you to choose your preferred shell experience. Linux users can opt for Bash, and Windows users can opt for PowerShell. And then we have the mobile app. You can diagnose and fix issues quickly, run commands to manage your Azure resources, and you can also run ad hoc Azure CLI or PowerShell commands straight from the mobile app. Azure Resource Manager allows the automatic creation of resources using different automation and scripting tools such as Azure PowerShell, CLI, the portal, REST APIs, and client software development kits. Azure Resource Manager. I showed you in the portal when there was ways of saving that template. Those are called ARM templates, and they allow that automatic deployment and configuration of resources quickly, consistently, and fast. If your company had several business units that required 10 resources of the same type, you would use Azure Resource Manager templates to create this. That would ensure you have consistent deployment across your environment. So I'm back in the portal and I'm going to create a VM using PowerShell. If you recall, Cloud Shell will take me into that browser environment, so I'm going to click there. And since it's the first time I'm launching PowerShell, I have to set up storage. It says I have no storage mounted. So I'm going to go find an account I can build my storage to. And I've been using HR Test. Go ahead and create storage. So I'm creating a storage account where I can store my code. There we go. Just going to move it up so we can see a little bit better. So I've requested a Cloud Shell environment. It's succeeded. It's connecting to the terminal now. So I want to make sure I'm using PowerShell in the top left here. So I'm going to switch to PowerShell. It's warning me I'm switching. I'm going to confirm I'm switching. And it's connecting me again, as you can see. Okay, when you see this, you know it's ready to go. I'm going to place in some code I have ready, and it's going to create a new resource group, name the resource group, and pick the location, which is East US. So there it is, my resource group name and my location. It's succeeded, as you can see. So I'm going to verify that that resource group was created. Paste that code here. And what am I looking for? So it's get resource group. I want to make sure I can see that resource group created. As you can see from the table, it's showing me what resource groups I have created in this description. And you can see the one we've just created at the very bottom. I'm going to go ahead and paste some code I have ready to create that VM. Pasting it here. You can see it's called new AZVM, my resource group, location, subnet security, etc. So I need to put a username. And put a password. And it's creating those resources. As you can see, it's completed here. Let's go look for it. I'm going to search for it. It's called My VM PowerShell. There it is. So it's the one I just created. It is running, as you can see here. So let's jump back into the Cloud Shell and execute a few commands. Making sure I'm in PowerShell here, giving us a chance to reload. So I'm going to confirm some information about my virtual machine. I've got some code here I'm going to paste in. Let's take a look. So get AZVM. The name is My VM PowerShell. I want to find that status and put it in a table. So there it is. It's showing me it's in my resource group PowerShell. It is running, as you can see. So let's go and stop this machine. I've got some code ready for that again, pasting that in. So I'm going to stop this VM. Let's enter. It's asking if I do want to stop it, and I'm going to say yes. So why? You can see it has succeeded. It stopped my VM. Let's verify it has stopped. And as you can see, it's been deallocated or stopped. Okay, let's close this down. So I've just stopped my VM. Going back into the portal, I'm going to refresh. And you can see it has stopped. So while we're in here, I just want to review advisor recommendations. I'm going to go and look for advisor. This is Azure Advisor. Microsoft takes a look at your deployed resources and makes recommendations based on best practices in categories such as reliability, security, performance, cost, and operational excellence. As you can see, they're in categories in front of me. Just sliding down so you can see. I've got 44 recommendations in security. Some are high impact, which is red. I've got medium impact, which is yellow. And I've got low impact, which is blue or green. I've got some reliability recommendations as well, a couple in operational excellence, and some in performance, or one in performance. If I go to security, I can click on that category. Drilling down a little further, I can scroll through and see my impacts. I've got some quick fix buttons as well. Let's log into one of them. Clicking on it gets a little deeper, tells me what the issue is, and I can look at remediation steps as well. Going back out to Advisor, let's look at operational excellence. I've got two here, a high and a low impact, so I've got two there. The low impact one says create an Azure Service Health Alert, so I can do that for sure. And that's two recommendations under operational excellence. So these are my deployed resources. Azure goes in and looks at best practices, sees ways they can help me save money, look at performance issues, and it's meant to help me out. I can also go into Service Health from here. Service Health is basically the health of Azure resources and data centers around the world. You can filter by subscriptions if you're in many different subscriptions. I've got quite a few on. I can take a few off if I want. So I can just click my main one, which I was using HR Test. Maybe I put a few other ones so I can see what's going on around the world. I can pick the regions I want to be alerted for. Scrolling down, I've got all the regions here. So right now I've got 17. I can add a few more if I've got more resources in those areas. And I can also select by service. So I'm going to select all services because I want to be alerted for all services in those areas. I can see if there's any planned maintenance coming up, and there is one. And I can also look at health history. These are issues that would have happened in the past. I can click on, for example, monitor. Tells me the issue, what was impacted, summary of the impact, preliminary root cause, and mitigation. So that's Service Health coming back out. These are Azure resources around the world and the health of those resources. Another free resource we have is Azure Monitor. As soon as you launch a resource in Azure, launch a VM or set up a database, we're starting to collect metrics and log information. Metrics are telling you how your resource is performing, and logs record when the resource is created or modified. And we're using those metrics to tell you how your resource is performing, how much the resource is consuming, for example, network bandwidth or consumption, and we can also add monitor agents to collect this operational data for your resources. In applications, we're monitoring data such as the performance and functionality of the code you've written, regardless of the platform. Looking at resource monitoring data, we're looking at the operations of the resource itself and giving you recommendations. Azure Subscription Monitoring is telling you about the operation and management of the Azure subscription, as well as data about the overall health and operation of the resource itself. You can also set alerts. In Module 3, we covered Azure Core Solutions, IoT, Machine Learning, and Cognitive Services. Each one of these topics are their own multi-day course. We wrapped up by looking at Monitor and many ways to manage your deployments. This concludes part 1 of this course, where we covered cloud concepts, the benefits of the cloud, Azure regions, Azure Core Solutions, ending with management tools. Thank you for your participation today, and we look forward to having you next time for part 2.